Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our digital video forum. My name is Gabriel Dusil. I am the Chief Marketing and Corporate Strategy Officer at Visual Unity. What I'd like to start with is to give you a 10,000 meter view of the industry that we're in, to give you kind of a bigger picture of where we believe the industry is going to the end of this decade. So let me start by looking at this from the perspective of the last 2 decades. When we were building out the last 2 decades on the internet, we were focusing on website presence. We wanted to have e-commerce on the internet. We were connecting people to the internet as well. And it was really about data. But as we move into this decade and as video started to become popular, around 2005 video started to become very popular because of YouTube and other types of services that were becoming available. And by 2016, Cisco is telling us that we're going to be at about 100 exabytes of data. Exabytes, how much is an exabyte? We're talking about 1 million terabytes of data. So there's a big explosion from that perspective. And it's not just about connecting websites and e-commerce, it's now connecting devices. So by the end of last decade, we had about a third of the world's population connected online, a third of the 7 billion people. But we're looking at, by 2016, 30 billion devices connected on the internet. And it's not just about data anymore, it's now about entertainment. It's about lifestyle, and we're moving from an internet generation to a digital society throughout this decade. It's about the relevance of client ownership. It's about maintaining revenue streams. It's about maintaining some sense of relevance in the industry itself, because each of these industries are trying to take a piece of each other's market share. So let's look at some of these battles that are happening between these industries today. Over the top, services are basically completely bypassing the broadcast infrastructure and using the internet to send video online. And it's not just about sending video to televisions, it's now sending videos to PCs, to tablets, and to mobiles. That's one of the battles. Another battle that's happening is between the networking side and over the top. So networking, network service providers, ISPs, internet service providers. Across Europe, the average is around 13 gigabytes of data per month. North America, with the introduction of OTT services like Netflix, they're averaging at the moment around 45 gigabytes per month. The top 1% of users online can easily use 160 gigabytes of data in 1 month. If we look at it from the perspective of Europe starting to get into OTT services, we can see a huge usage of video data across Europe, when we're considering that at the moment 61% of Europe is already online, but not yet using an OTT service. The US has about 40 million OTT users using Netflix, another, let's say, 6 million users using Hulu Plus. That is giving us an early indication of how much data can actually go through Europe once we start to have a mainstream OTT service available here. So the ISPs are battling the OTT providers because they're saying, look, we have our users, we're increasing our subscribers. All of a sudden, they're using 5 times, 10 times the amount of bandwidth, but we're not making any more money. So we have the OTT providers making money off of every single subscriber. They're pumping up the number of gigabytes that they're using on a monthly basis, and they're saying, well, we have to, as ISPs, upgrade our backbone while the OTT providers are making the money from their subscribers. But they're not getting the capital themselves as ISPs to build out those backbones to support all of that additional video data. As sales in OTT increases, ISPs have the burden to invest in bandwidth and upgrade their infrastructure to keep up with that demand. So that's why we're seeing kind of a battle between the network providers and OTT services. And that's leading into this issue right now. It's called net neutrality versus internet governance. This is a battle between those that are saying, okay, keep the internet free and let us transfer what we want. And internet governance are saying, well, we actually want to police and manage all of that data that is being transferred. So what happens is, in internet governance, is we have data discrimination. ISPs can say, well, I'm not going to let that peer-to-peer traffic through my network. I can filter it if I want. Or that video traffic, I'm going to charge more for it because it takes much more bandwidth. Or we're going to see, as we already see today, bandwidth caps by a lot of ISPs saying, well, you're not going to exceed more than 30 gigabytes per month. And if you do, then we're going to charge you for that. And a lot of this is coming out in the last 10 years because of the amount of video that is being transmitted over the internet. And you can see here from Cisco, from the 100 exabytes of data by 2016, 70% of that data will be video. We're going to be seeing a lot of entertainment going over the internet moving forward. And that's about a 35% increase year on year of video traffic in the next 3 years. Now, another battle that's happening is between the mobility side and applications. Now, this is the communications and let's say computing. Back in the last 20 years, the mobile providers owned the clients, they owned the telephones. The telephone was the main application because it had voice, it had data, it had the contacts, and they basically held on to that ecosystem of mobility. But that is now moved into an app-centric society. We care much less about the phone itself, and we care about the million apps that we can access online, whether it's Apple iOS or whether it's an Android application. We're moving from a phone-centric society to an app-centric society, and the battle here is the issue because the mobile providers are feeling they're losing control of their clients. They don't have control over their subscriber base because the phone is not the most important part anymore. It's the applications that are being downloaded online. A lot of that is because of the internet access that we can have through our data services through our mobile. Another battle, and of course this is one of the big ones, is internet piracy versus the entertainment industry. Envisional did a study a couple of years ago. It's fairly dated, let's say now, but it still gives us a perspective of what's happening in the world of piracy. When they did the study, and it's kind of hard to do these studies because there's a lot of data to correlate, they determined that about 1/4 of the data was actually being transmitted through peer-to-peer networks or through cyber lockers. And if you're not familiar with a cyber locker is a service that you pay a monthly fee, and all of the data sits in the cloud, and you can download as many movies or films that you want, typically illegally, but you pay that monthly service, and then you have the peer-to-peer networks beside that. So when we take just the BitTorrent data, which is typically the biggest piece of this pie, and we analyze what is being transmitted, what is being shared in BitTorrent, we see that 1/3 of it is movies, the third part is in television, and then the rest is in games and other types of software. So let's take this down to a next level and take a look at the peer-to-peer and the cyber locker infrastructure over the last 10 years. You may be familiar with Napster. So Napster started around 1999, and they rose to about 26 million users, at which time they shut down because of lawsuit pressures from the Motion Picture Association of America and the Recording Industry Association of America. That was considered the first phase of peer-to-peer networking. Then came Kazaa, and Kazaa peaked at 2003, at which time the RIAA, the Recording Industry Association of America, that represents the music industry, announced their suing of the public that would be trading music online. And from that announcement, the number of users on Kazaa started to decrease, and a total of around 20,000 people in the end were sued. Eventually, Kazaa shut down by the end of last decade. Now, Mega Uploader is one of the famous cyber lockers. It had 180 million registered users. By the time they were shut down in January of 2012, they had 25 petabytes of data storage and 80 million users, unique users, accessing the site on a daily basis. So they shut down at around the 19th of January 2012. And finally, we have BitTorrent, which is still at the moment going strong. In the same month that the Mega Upload closed down, they announced 150 million active users and growing at 50%. So we're at the moment estimating around 225 million users by the end of this year. So we can see that there's a growing threat from internet piracy. Let's take it to the next level and see why some of this piracy is happening on a global perspective. And I want to take it from the perspective of the release windows of premium content. And when I talk about premium content, I'm talking about movies. So when a movie comes out, typically there is about a 4-month delay before you have access to that movie on DVD or Blu-ray. At which time, around 1 month later, you can rent the title. Around a month after that, pay TV services and video on demand services start to get access. And typically, around 2 years later, the movie gets broadcasted. So this is kind of a generalization of the release windows of a premium title. And I'm going to pick on the US at the moment, specifically Hollywood, being the largest entertainment market in the world from a revenue perspective. And when we look at it from an international release, revenue is the highest, of course, when the movie comes out, and then there's an exponential decay of that movie as we move through time and as it moves towards the long tail of movie releases. The big dynamic here is with the international releases. In almost all cases, there is a significant delay by the time the international markets have access to the content. And in some cases, they actually may not have the content access for years, if not ever, if they can't get the content rights to that movie. So you have a lot of users in remote areas of the world that don't anticipate having access to that content. They see the Americans are watching it in the theaters, or the Europeans are watching it shortly after, and they're sitting having potentially that access to download it through peer-to-peer networks, through BitTorrent sites, as their only way to have availability of that content. So it's not necessarily a justification to piracy online, but it's definitely an observation of the motivations on a global scale and the hunger for having access to content immediately when other remote markets have access to the same content. So the last battle that I want to talk about here is a broadcast-centric versus a social-centric aspect to entertainment. Okay? When we look at the broadcast market, of course, is central to cable networks, to distribution of movies, and as a secondary ring around that entertainment is social networking. At the moment, from a broadcast perspective, that social networking is second screen, and some broadcasters that are not in second screen are a little bit nervous about second screen. They're talking about live content and movies that they love through Facebook, through Twitter, and other types of social media, discussing how they love it and commenting on it and recommending the content to friends and so on. But we also see the reverse happening in the social networks, social being, of course, the central core to these networks, and entertainment is at the periphery. We see services like Facebook supporting live video feeds through Facebook in order to watch entertainment through a social media network. And of course, we also have applications and computing to all complement the lifestyles that we're enjoying today in accessing our entertainment and other types of content. That brings me actually full circle to the industry wars that are happening between entertainment, communications, and computing. I would like to present to you that OTT is actually a service that binds all three of these industries together. Central to over-the-top services is networking. Central to OTT services is cloud computing, to store and to distribute the quality of service that people are expecting from their entertainment. And of course, central to OTT is the entertainment aspect of the service. So I want to present to you, as I wrap up the presentation here, a perspective of where we believe OTT is going as a service, as a platform. And one of the big aspects of OTT is search and discovery and recommendation engines. Search and discovery is not just about statistics of how many people have watched. It's a complex ecosystem of many different parameters that are brought together to better understand the subscriber and recommend to them the type of content that they really want to see. And that could be through friend suggestions, it could be through statistics, it could be through a collaborative behavior of different users that have similar interests. But all of this is brought together and correlated to give the best suggestions to subscribers. Because if we can engage the client and we can motivate them and have it personal, then they will stay within the OTT environment. They will social network through there. They will discuss how they're happy or unhappy with the titles with their friends. And the longer they stay in this kingdom of OTT, the more money they'll spend on the services. Another aspect of OTT that I want to talk about is that OTT is not just about video. OTT is evolving to be an ecosystem of entertainment, about data, about productivity, about storage, computing, and bringing all the three industries that I talked about into a single platform. This is what we believe are the beginning steps of where OTT is going. At the moment, we see OTT, over-the-top services, as a video platform, as a video entertainment platform, but there are many more aspects to OTT that can bring the platform as a central aspect to tomorrow's and today's digital society. So to finish off, it's important to look at it the perspective of how big this market is going into the future. By 2017, we see that OTT as a market will be around $37 billion. But even at $37 billion, it's still only about 9%, less than 10% of the overall broadcast infrastructure. Broadcast infrastructure being almost $400 billion in size. Being a company in both camps, Visual Unity, we've been doing broadcast for 22 years. We've been doing digital video for 15 years. We work very closely with broadcasters in order to bring OTT to them as one of the biggest clients in the space, and really convincing them that OTT is not a threat, but really an opportunity to evolve with how subscribers are changing their behaviors and how they consume entertainment. We believe that the major movers in this space are the broadcasters, the national broadcasters. Those broadcasters are implementing OTT. Then we see the regional broadcasters and the smaller studios looking at this as an opportunity to also expand their digital presence. But there's also the communications market, the communication industry that has an opportunity to also get into OTT as well, and we're seeing that with some of the content delivery network suppliers as well. But OTT is bigger than that as well, because there are also opportunities with enterprises that have a possibility to get into OTT because of all the video content that they have and that they can monetize online. So OTT has a much bigger scope in these three tiers if we look at it from this perspective. But I also want to look at it from the perspective of a regional view. The Americans have been quite instrumental in driving the OTT market space, and they're the first movers in this area. Europe is typically about 18 months to 24 months behind the US in terms of adoption. And then the emerging markets are, again, another 24 months behind Europe. But the advantage that we have here is that when we look at what the Americans are doing from the OTT space, it kind of gives us a little bit of perspective of what's happening for us in the future. So if they're doing something today, then likely we'll be implementing that in the next 18 to 24 months from our perspective. And we also have this dynamic of leapfrogging type companies. We have a client, for example, in Tanzania called Clouds Media, which is leapfrogging a lot of the European suppliers in implementing OTT today on an African basis. So thank you very much for listening to the presentation. We have a great afternoon session of presentations. I hope you enjoy them. And let us know if you have any questions during the break, and I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you very much again. I would just have one question, because when I look at our audience, I see not only people from entertainment and communication and computing industry, and I would like to ask you about some examples in other verticals, because you were mentioning this tier 3, which is corporations basically, and they're increasing video content and the management. So are there any typical examples from, let's say, banking or healthcare that you could describe how they can profit from OTT and what are their business opportunities there?
Right. Actually, it's a good question, Elena, because I would say that the one area where OTT seems to be of big interest from an enterprise perspective, and it may be something of surprise to some of you, is in the house of worship. And they want to offer that content to a closed user group of worshipers that would like to learn from those videos. And it's one of the areas where we're seeing a lot of interest in the adoption of OTT, because in adopting OTT from an enterprise perspective, it allows that community to control the amount of subscribers that are subscribing to that service, and also monetizing that service to only the subscribers that they wish to monetize. Another area that we're seeing interest is in retail brands and other types of large media brands that have corporate videos for education, for training, also some new advertising videos that should not yet be accessible from a public perspective. And a lot of these enterprises have libraries of videos, don't feel very comfortable putting it on YouTube because they typically would lose the rights to that content once they put it on YouTube. They want to have an OTT service like YouTube, but in a much more closed user group where they can control the amount of subscribers and who has access to that content.
Thank you.